Cool. Thanks. Thank you very much, Jessica. So yeah, here we are. I'm actually going to turn my camera off so you don't have to look at my face really at all. Just focus on the slides. And obviously, if you have any questions, please throw them in the chat and then we'll get there at the end. So beyond the book, student support and engagement through non-traditional outreach. My name is Brian Sajecki. I am a student support and engagement librarian at the University of Buffalo, and I've been at UB since 2016. I've taught probably a gajillion undergrads since then. Really, that's all I do. It's a whole bunch of teaching throughout the semester. And my interests in librarianship center around accessibility and availability of information, as well as using education to build long-lasting relationships with students. So my co-presenter, who is not here today because he couldn't come, is Keith Nichols. He's also a student support and engagement librarian. He couldn't be here, but I want you all to know how instrumental he was in making both of the collaborations I will be discussing today happen, as well as assisting me in creating the presentation. So without his work on this, we really wouldn't have gotten to the next level. So just a couple of learning objectives here. In this presentation, I'm going to discuss ways that you can prepare and construct a needs assessment for unique outreach endeavors at your institution. And this will include the development of accessible and inclusive outreach strategies aligned with information literacy instruction. Lastly, I will highlight that you should leverage any partnerships to make the most out of your goals and the goals that the other side in your partnership might share. Oh, went backwards. Okay. So just a little bit of background about the University of Buffalo. So UB, or the University of Buffalo, is a flagship of the whole State University of New York system, which is a whole bunch of colleges. In addition, it is a Tier 1 research institute with campuses in the city of Buffalo and the suburb of Amherst. The university has approximately 21,000 undergraduates on an annual basis, and there are also over 140 undergrad programs, as well as over 220 master's programs at the graduate level. So really, research is what we do. Students come into the university and their professors just automatically think that they have inherently these wonderful research skills because research is embedded into almost everything that they do, starting from being a freshman. And we know this not to be the case. I'm sure that at your institutions, the way that you've seen it, you probably can attest to this as well. So they have to kind of get to that next level and they have to work to better their skills because there are information gaps that we know of. So Keith and I work with a team comprised of 7 librarians altogether called Education Services within the University at Buffalo Libraries. We're pretty dynamic and we deliver almost all the instruction provided by the UB libraries. Since 2016, when I was first hired, the Ed Services team of the UB Libraries has worked with a writing and rhetoric course from the English department called English 105. This is a 4-credit course, and these students are native English language speakers. Currently, what we do with this class is we deliver a 3 or 4 module suite to roughly 140 sections of the course on an annual basis. So what does that mean? We're going to see about 70 to 80 sections in the fall coming up, and we're going to see those classes 3 to 4 times. That roughly is about, I don't know, I'm probably going to teach about 60 to 70 classes once the fall begins. And they are put together in scaffolded suite-like modules that all work with different pieces of the research process. And they're smartly put together just based on experiences that we've had over the last 6 years. A lot of reiteration has gone into this, but I don't really want to belabor that. We also work with an ELI 105 course, which is similar, but this one is specifically for students who are English language learners, and they come from all over the world to study at UB. And with this section, we actually provide 1 full credit hour, and we see them 10 times. And that has graded stakes. There's a final deliverable at the end, a multimodal infographic, and they really work with us for a lot longer time because they really need the support. and they really need to kind of work with us a little bit closer as opposed to the English 105s. Trust me, we would love to see all these students more, but it doesn't really work that way. And I'll get to that as we go. Within the last year, most of the team of education services achieved tenure track status. So woo, this was something that we had been hoping for years, because we kind of went through the ringer a little bit. We were part-time, we were full-time, but part-time at the same time with benefits. It was strange. Thank you very much. I see in the chat, congratulations. So once it happened, it was like, okay, this is real now. What are we going to do? Because we're doing all this teaching, but we know that the tenure track is going to involve a lot more responsibility. We wanted to embrace liaison roles. And at that point, we were already kind of doing things with certain sub-departments, but because we weren't working specifically with faculty like a typical liaison, we didn't really have that opportunity to build relationships, which would further us in a tenure track process. So since we thought, hey, you know, we're student focused, why don't we just expand our reach? So what we did is expand that reach. And because students are the most interesting group, and because they have particular needs coming from high school, especially after the pandemic, we were like, okay, this kind of makes sense here. Why don't we see who needs help? Why don't we go in a different direction? As I already mentioned, we've tailored our instruction based on our experiences, and I didn't really want to belabor it like I said before, but I can really talk your ear off about it if you ever want to reach out to me. But this quote from Riley and Witt really sums up where we wanted to go and why. And it was beyond just, okay, you're tenure track, you have more responsibility. No, it was student focused, and there was a reason for it. So this is the quote that I've selected. Many undergraduate students lack the skills to effectively find, interpret, evaluate, and synthesize information. Librarians must make efforts to engage, to meet students where they are, and to provide information and services that are relevant and useful to them. Now, this quote is from 2009. It is still applicable today in 2022, maybe more so than ever. It's kind of strange that it's still really there, and it makes sense. A whole bunch of people just disappeared. I'm still here, right?
Yep, you're still good.
Okay,
yeah, you're good.
All of a sudden, all the people's faces went away. So either way, so it was time to meet students where they are beyond the classroom. And we really wanted to find students in underserved areas and departments, those who may have been forgotten and may need it the most. So in finding them where they are, this led us to the idea of working with two specific departments, UB Athlete Academic Affairs and Residential Education. Two very different places, but places that need us because we hadn't really done anything before. So the first direction we decided to explore was towards the student athletes of the university. UB Athletics are Division I and part of the Mid-American Conference, or the MAC. We had all taught student athletes before in the English 105s, and we noticed that they tended to miss a lot of classes, specifically due to their multiple obligations to the sport that they're playing. In that vein, they would fall behind a lot. Even if we're not responsible for graded stakes in some little instances with our English 105 classes, when they're not there, they're not getting the experience. And it was kind of upsetting because it's like, these kids need help and they're already overloaded. What can we do? Naturally, Keith and I were unsure how to approach them because the last thing that we wanted to do was to come on too strong and scare the department, you know, because librarians are so scary. Usually they just don't know what we do. So that's scary in and of itself. Instead, we were calculated and we planned this out. First, we would do some internal research and see if there was any existing connection there. As it turns out, there was, but it was kind of weak. The librarian working with the student athletes had been a little busy and kind of walked away from it due to their heightened job responsibilities and the limited interactions they had seen while they were working with the department over, I don't know, about 5 to 10 years. And they were tired. They didn't see a need anymore. They thought that, okay, well, when athletics needs me, they're going to call me. Or they just don't call at all because they don't necessarily know. People leave, people get promoted. Athletes end up graduating, athletes transfer out, so there's no continuity. We saw this as a challenge, and we were eager to explore further. So the other thing internally is we also researched if any other departments were working with the athletes. And the first thing we discovered was that tutoring and academic support services, or TASS, provided academic tutors for each student athlete. I already had a connection with TASS. I had been working with them for about 3 years because they teach an LAI 203 learning and instruction class that works with students on academic probation. So if they're on probation, they take this course as a remedial course. So I come in and kind of do a one-shot thing and discuss some research skills and really kind of more or less like an orientation to the library and study skills. And I really was deploying it during the pandemic, so it was a lot of remote learning. And I know that TASS is great and they think we're cool. They work with us. And I was like, okay, that's great. We're great. They're great. Glad they already have some support. That's awesome. That means that athletes already have something. How can we augment it though? The next step is we did some heavy canvassing of library literature to see what other institutions have done in the past. Now, we found some interesting material and approaches, and I'm only going to highlight a few. Really very, very different stuff out there. So at Mississippi State, librarians train student tutors on library skills to assist their assigned athletes with research. Keith and I really liked this idea and thought it could work for us too. At the University of Tennessee, the library rolled out this massive campaign with videos. They made fake playing cards to show that, okay, the librarians exist and maybe they're unathletic, heck, even nerdy looking, but they were there to support student athletes and that made them cool. Keith and I thought this was really self-deprecating and we didn't want to do it. We wanted to be taken seriously and not go from that humorous aspect. Our humor will shine in our actual natural personalities, so we didn't really want to go in that direction. But there are other instances that we saw of different institutions doing that as well, embracing that nerdiness. We didn't want to do that. We didn't need to put on that mask. So looking at the literature, regardless of what we saw, was incredibly beneficial because we felt more equipped after that. And then lastly, we made our plan of action. This involved finding the appropriate contact person first. And that was actually really difficult because the UB Athletics site is awful. It's like, I don't know, a 7th grader made it, or it's like Web 2.0 stuff. I was expecting to see like word walls and things like that. It just looked awful, and it still looks awful. I know, Aaron. Yeah, and it's not a .edu site; it's a .com. So because I think there's a monetary piece to it where people can buy merch and whatnot. So it's kind of hard to find who was there. Either way, we probably emailed like 3 to 4 different people until we found the appropriate person. And then moving forward, we wanted to ensure that when we talked to them, that we told them what we were capable of and prepared to do. We're information experts. We feel comfortable selling ourselves and our expertise. We also came prepared to ask questions while making sure that we remained realistic about our limitations. So what do you all think? Do you think that this first meeting went okay? Do you think it was kind of like meh? Where did it go? Our first meeting went great. Woo, yay, awesome. Oh man, I picked all these graphics because I wanted it to look gaudy, just so you know. Either way, our first meeting was awesome. Keith and I left feeling more excited to get started on the partnership. We weren't sure exactly how we were going to get there, but we knew that we could actually invest some time in this and feel good about it. So we had this initial plan that we hatched in the fall of 2021. With our new contacts in athletics, we decided that we were going to start small-ish, not bite off more than we could chew. Now, remember, we wanted to be realistic about limitations. That's important. And I'm going to really come back to that several times. That included the following: availability of time, the fact we have other job responsibilities, the fact that we have families. At that time, Keith's wife was pregnant, so he was about to be a new father. There are things that are going on, especially in our personal lives. We have to kind of take that into consideration all the time and do the best that we can. Unfortunately, we're only 2 people and we haven't figured out how to clone ourselves just yet. And I don't know if I would even want to, because I don't know if I could deal with more of myself or more of Keith, to be completely honest with you. So what we did is we created this, what is known as a research triage model. Now, we didn't really come across any of this in the literature that we looked at, but it seemed to make sense. And we've done this before with different departments in different instances, especially during the pandemic. What our idea was is, first, we would work with the academic support tutors or the APS tutors in a tutor training orientation session. Now, athletics meets in an orientation setting at the beginning of the fall and right before the spring semester each year, and they do two. So if a student can't make it on, say, a Wednesday, they could come on a Thursday, but they're obligated to go to one or the other. So they will indeed get some sort of orientation about being a tutor for athletics, and then we were just embedded in it. During these sessions, Keith and I would relay that what we do as librarians is X, Y, and Z. And also what they are expected to do as tutors. I think that a lot of the time these APS tutors think that they have to do more than what they're assigned to do because they don't necessarily know where that line is, because it's a fine line. They do not need to know everything. So it was important to understand that they can comfortably refer their students to a librarian if the need was there. So that would be in the middle, refer to the librarian if needed. After that, students would be signed up for a one-on-one with us after normal business hours on either a Monday or a Tuesday. So we were going to go with that model. This is what we had. And the one-on-ones would be between 5 and 7 o'clock on Mondays and Tuesdays in the fall. And I believe we did Tuesday and Wednesdays in the spring because of the fact that things changed as far as when athletes were available because of sports. So moving along. During the training, it was important to convey where and when to draw the line that I was telling you about. In our presentations, we wanted to be explicit. We wanted to talk about what we can and will do. So after that, it was just time to kind of wait and see what happened. And we went through with these learning outcomes. And I hope the Lego man's okay. I really do, Nancy. So we wanted to go with these learning outcomes of evaluating sources based on the need, understanding that research is iterative and, it's a changing process. It might not be the difference, or it might not be the same every time. Information judgment, so authority, credibility. Being able to identify appropriate keywords and then make research questions, and then use information sources ethically, understanding that there are different parts of the citation. All right, so would they need us? Yes, they needed us. They wanted us. We were busy all semester in the fall, and it went into the spring. Keith and I mostly had 2 students scheduled each Monday and Tuesday from week 5 of the semester up until fall recess. In the spring, we actually worked one-on-one with certain students that transferred in from junior colleges that had a little bit of issues. We're going to say functional literacy, not really focused on being there for school, but because of this Tier 1 Research Institute and all these things that are embedded into it, we needed to get them to the next level and work with them a little bit more closely, especially making sure that they're not, doing things like plagiarizing and whatnot. Mostly they needed help with English 105 assignments, which we were no stranger to that. Also, some of the higher level students, there was a person on the women's basketball team who was, she was a complete all-star. She needed help with the literature review. She met with Keith several weeks, even in his office after meeting with him several times on a Monday or a Tuesday, and also with multimodal projects and then other research papers for other courses. This trend continued into the spring semester as well, like I said. Simultaneously, while this was going on, this isn't all that we were doing. We were moving into a different partnership at the same time, because that's a good idea. Why not form 2 things at the same time when you're not sure how the first thing's going to work? Let's go back in time to fall of 2021 again. Our next partnership, was residential education. Now, residential education, just focus on the resident part of it. Think dorms, okay? This was different. This was different from the get-go. We knew that this was going to be a unique opportunity. I'm going to come back to that a couple of times. That's going to need a similar yet different approach than athletics. This partnership began with a cold call. Okay, so it was a cold call to a coordinator who just so happened to be a person I knew from high school, who was in a band with me when we were like 13. So it kind of worked that way. It's really strange because you never know who's going to come back into your life and when. And we had a good relationship. We were acquaintances, but when I was looking at this department, I'm like, oh, it's Frank. Okay, yeah, absolutely. Building on connections is super important, and the network was there. So I knew he was reliable. I had a good feeling he would want to work with us. So during this initial meeting, we went in with the intention of listening first, figuring out exactly what they wanted in a partnership with us and what they believed their students needed, because that need is what we needed to focus on. We're not just going to go in there and throw stuff at the wall like spaghetti and see if it sticks. We're not going to do that. There's enough messes that we deal with on a daily basis. We're going to just go in there and try to be as concrete as possible. After that, we had the idea to tour the spaces that they were going to offer to us. And they offered to us one specific space that I will get to in a little bit. To be honest, though, we had a lot of pie in the sky ideas and really needed to center first. So we did our research before eventually drafting our pilot plan and bringing it back to the coordinator. So just notice that this process right here wasn't identical to that we used with athletics, probably because it had a little bit of confidence behind it. And also it had a little bit more education embedded because it was right in the name. And also it didn't hurt that they had their own core values of campus living. So because residential ed strictly focuses on the teaching and the learning of students that live on campus, they already had embedded core values that structured all their programming. This was helpful. It gave us some direction. What can a librarian do without direction? I don't know. These are what they had. Inclusion, which is the idea of creating a community that welcomes and celebrates every student, staff, and guest, inclusive of their diverse identities, beliefs, and ways of thinking. This is important to us because DEI initiatives are embedded in our information literacy instruction. The next one is learning. This focuses on cultivating an environment for all students and staff to expand their knowledge through exploration and engagement. Learning. This aligns with another couple of our tenets with social constructivism and universal design for learning. Safety, which seems like a given. Obviously, you want to be safe in everything that you do. But safety, as according to Res Ed, is the ability to foster an environment that protects the community's physical, personal, technological, and economic well-being. So 4 different things altogether. Then lastly, integrity. That's honesty, reliability, truthfulness, trustworthiness, and ethics within all behaviors. And the way that we go about our information literacy instruction is integrity and ethics are built in. Mostly they are for everybody, so it's not really a surprise there. It was quickly expressed to us that whatever we do within this partnership, what we were going to do was adhere to the core values and augment them in some way, shape, or form because they were already going to be embedded for us anyway. It wasn't like we were doing double the work. It was just there already. It was just kind of like a happenstance sort of thing. Like most librarians, we appreciated the structure and we treated it as a frame. It was important. We like frames. Remember how I said unique partnership? The partnership was and is unique, and it's always going to be unique for a multitude of different reasons. And the first one is that just because of the nature of where it is, it's in the dorms. Before we did any true planning, we did our due diligence by doing more research, just like we did with athletics, about what has been done in the past at other institutions. In our research, we found that most outreach endeavors incorporated some sort of programming and that they all had varied success. Just like our work with athletics, we wanted to start small and make sure we did it, quote unquote, right and as right as possible the first time. So we diagnosed our do's and don'ts. We would stick by these to ensure that we were being true to ourselves in the collaboration. Think of it as kind of like a manifesto, a librarian manifesto, we wanted to make sure that based on what we saw in the literature, we would take that to heart and do our best. So dormitories are a very personal space for students. Outreach to students in residence halls, it can be strange territory to navigate. It requires patience and grace. We made sure to always remember this because we're the strangers here, not them. Last thing you want to do is make somebody feel uncomfortable just because of your presence. The way that our dorms are situated, they're all over the campus, on North Campus and South Campus. And where we were going to be working was it's in a specific place called the Ellicott Complex, also referred to as Legoland. They're kind of old looking buildings. And on the inside, it's got this like dungeon-y feel, and they're all connected by tunnels. So we were like right smack dab in the middle of one of them. So students all over the place. There were dorms upstairs. There were dorms on another hall right next to this learning center we were working in. So we took that to heart. We made sure that we were going to be comfortable. Every successful collaboration we read about incorporated incentives, okay? So like food, candy, snacks, drinks, gift cards, so on and so forth. Now, this wouldn't be a problem for us because we had buy-in from the coordinator and he promised the food. Usually we can get some funding if we want. I'll get to what I did in a little while. Beyond that, I had to do some grassroots promotion in the spring for something that we wanted to do. But most of the time here at UB, we can allocate some funds, even if we have to beg, grovel, and steal. It happens. We wanted to make sure that we were creative too, and to try new things that we didn't do in our traditional spaces in the library or the classroom. We weren't sure how we were going to do this, but we wanted to adopt more of a laissez-faire approach with students to ensure they were comfortable. Now, I'm not saying laissez-faire in the whole idea of, oh, we don't care what goes on, let's just see what happens. No, we wanted to be comfortable with them because we were in their space. So instead of feeling like we needed to be this high and mighty sage on the stage, talking head in a classroom or something like that, it was a little bit more comfortable. It was a little kind of like off the record, off the books. So they knew that we had inherent authority, but we didn't use that and we didn't abuse that in any way. We never do, but I think students can sometimes be reluctant, especially when you're on their space. Lastly, we would incorporate some sort of a qualitative assessment so we could get feedback in everything we did, even if it was just small one-on-one conversations with the students that we were working with. Okay, on the other hand, we had the do nots. These are the things we wanted to avoid, and they're pretty simple. They're kind of like the opposite. We wouldn't act like strangers and impose. So we weren't going to kind of be wearing that mask. We were just going to be us. We refused to simply transplant things that we already did somewhere else, like in the library or a classroom. We refused to do that because that's lazy. And also, it's not going to work. Students are already going to class. Now they're going to go home and you want them to go to another class? No, it's not going to work like that. We wanted to maintain a realistic approach too. So just like athletics, there's only so much time that we can do these kinds of things. And in the day, we don't want to get burnt out. That would happen real quickly, and we've been there before. The other thing that librarians in the literature faced a lot was feeling devalued or like a failure because things didn't work out the first or the second time. We refused to use the word failure, and we promised to take things and talk things out and improve the best that we could once we saw a potential hang-up. That way, we would never take anything personally. This was new, and we understood there would be growing pains. We didn't want to just walk away from something. Communication was key here. So our initial plan, fall 2021, all things considered, our first steps were to do three things. We wanted to provide workshops on specific topics regarding information literacy, but instead of doing it in a typical way, they were only segmented to be specific parts of the research process. That way, any student could attend any of them in order to not miss anything. There was some scaffolding, but not like our other instruction. This represented freedom of choice for students. We also planned to provide research help to students in a library reference style model. This would include 2 hours a day during the center's busiest times, from week 12 to the semester up until the exams. Now, we were going to be in this place called the Blake Center. which is an open study space for students in one of the dorm buildings. We were super excited to be in that place because it kind of resembles, the way that I say it is kind of like an elementary school library. It's a little bit smaller. It's got personal study spaces, a couple of different workshop rooms. It's got a help desk, a check-in area, and separate places where students can study behind like closed doors in silent places. So that was what we really wanted to do there. And then lastly, we would organize stress relief events like those that we had already put together in the libraries and other places, which we kind of had a lot of experience on. We were super excited to get started. So what really happened here? Remember when I said that we tried to avoid pie in the sky ideas? Well, it turned out we were unable to do everything we wanted within the full last academic year. So fortunately, we ran 6 workshops in the fall and the spring for a total of 12. And we decided on the 3 topics that you can see on the screen: developing a strong research question, building effective search strategies, evaluating sources for authority and truth. All of these had their own lesson plans. All of them were scaffolded in a way where, like I said, students could pick one or the other, and they didn't have to go to all 3 of them. They could just come to one. And we offered them on Wednesdays and Thursdays. So one week it would be Wednesday, and then the next week it would be Thursday. And we did it over a span of 6 weeks, and we did it intermittent between all of our other instruction. We had a strong reasoning for the construction and the delivery of the workshops because they were based on experience we had with and knowledge of early undergraduate research behaviors. First and second year students require easily digestible fragments of the research process that they can learn and refer to. Scaffolding of ideas and breaking down the research process into small, manageable chunks, it's been successful for the education services team in working with other groups on campus. Taking that previous experience and knowledge allowed us to leverage those skills into the 3 workshops. That they were all around how to be a successful researcher at a collegiate level. And like I said, each workshop was technically built on the one before it, but you didn't have to attend. You could pick and choose, you can do whatever you wanted here. And we marketed the heck out of these. We made sure to bring snacks as promised. We put signage up. There was marketing through email blasts. It was on the library website. It was put on several different academic calendars that students could access. And we saw some success. I can remark on that. Then we also managed to organize a stress relief day in May of the spring semester. This was the first time we were able to do an in-person event of this nature since the winter of 2019. Obviously, pandemic stuff, and I didn't feel comfortable doing anything in person, and I didn't want to put our students in that situation either. Okay, so how was this? It was a rousing success. We had over 150 students come in from 12 to 4 p.m. We ran out of snacks a couple of times. I ended up having to go buy some. It turns out that this was the most amount of people that have ever traveled through the Blake Center in a day. So that was pretty cool. Each student actually swiped their ID card at the door. So we know demographics, we know what their majors are, we know what age range they are, so on and so forth. And then we also had them scan a QR code and do a quick survey and tell us what they thought. We weren't really surprised about the turnout because students tend to love the free food and the therapy dogs. But it also included things like the mini golf course that you can see behind. Now, that was a labor of love. I raised about $250 in bottle returns to build that with Keith on the weekends right after his son was born. It was a good time. Like I said, labor of love. But then we had puzzles, coloring, and I'm no stranger to putting these together. I've been working with a team of others to put together stress relief endeavors for years, and I had a lot of faith in this one being successful. So that was good. We were very happy about that. We're going to plan it again in the fall. We're going to plan it again in the spring. We've already decided on the time, potentially the day. So we're doing well there. What didn't we do? We never actually did any research help. We didn't do any reference hours over there. We just didn't have any availability. It's still something we might want to do in the future, but right now it's just not feasible. So we're going to leave it as it lies. So now you've seen a snapshot of the partnerships we've been cultivating over the last year, and there's still a lot to be done, but we're content with what we've achieved thus far. It's important to note that reaching them wasn't all that we wanted. We wanted to reach them better, which what I mean by this is we wanted to ensure the connections were meaningful and that our approaches and information literacy endeavors, like workshops or even one-on-ones with athletes, focused on availability of information and accessibility of information. Research isn't the most exciting thing for undergrads, especially when it's forced on them. They often dread it and they struggle in various ways in order to make sure that, we're doing better and we're going to do things the way that we want to. We wanted to work in our typical instructions and interventions in a certain way. First thing we did is, we adhere to the ACRL framework. I'm pretty sure everybody here is at least familiar with it in some capacity, so I don't want to belabor it. But the thing about the ACRL framework is that it's up to interpretation, and it can be interpreted differently as long as you use it and as long as you make it make sense. So I see the different pieces of it in a different way, not just verbatim for what you see on the screen. And the way that I look at it when I'm working my information literacy and instruction lessons together, I interpret it a little bit differently. I'm not going to really get into it just because of time, but if you ever want to have a conversation with me about that off the record or on the record, that's fine. I'll tell you what I think about it and based on the experiences that I had. The next thing is critical information literacy. This is one of the most recent additions to our instruction. The theory relies on the idea that the way information has classically been created and distributed should be challenged. In our teaching, we strive to make our students impart different perspectives beyond scholarly journal articles and instead add different voices and perspectives into the conversation. We were definitely able to incorporate this within the one-on-ones with athletes as well as the workshops in the residence hall. It makes students think more about why they are reading, hence the term critical. They can look at it, they know where it's coming from, and it really makes meaning in a different way. And lastly, universal design for learning. This also incorporates social constructivism for us as well. We've been incorporating this in our instruction since the very beginning. Over time, it's evolved based on need. So if you're unfamiliar with UDL, this is really what it comes down to. You could just do a Google search on UDL and you're going to find it fairly quickly. We have conversations with our students. We do that a lot. That's where the engagement comes in, and we actually make the connection. That's what I focus on as a librarian, is making that long-lasting connection. That's really where my research is going. We also incorporate social constructivism, or the pedagogical theory that encompasses student interaction and socialization. And they're doing that with us as opposed to with peers, because it's usually one-on-one. The workshops, if there's more than 2 students, they can talk to each other. They really make sense of their inherent knowledge, and that's what we really want. The representation aspect is multimodality, and with student athletes as well as the tutors, we have a LibGuide to reference outside of our one-on-ones. The LibGuides are like gold, seriously. So on those LibGuides, we have videos, we got PDFs, we have links to certain databases, we have citation resources and the like. We really try to leave no stone unturned. And then lastly, we embrace the idea of de-jargoning library jargon. So this goes under expression and communication for us, because students have a hard enough time understanding whatever the hell we're trying to say. Quite honestly, this is unaccessible. It's inaccessible. The overarching desire is we want to make connections with our students, and to make connections with the concepts. Relying on the simple library jargon just clouds what we're trying to do, because students thrive on the simplicity of it all. So some examples here are the term reference help. Okay, go to the reference desk. What is that? Instead, that's just help with research. We're providing you help with research. Boolean terms, they're just combining words. So they're like in a relationship together now. Look at them, they're dating, they're in blah, 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 this and that. Database, it's an organization of things like Amazon or Netflix. And then lastly, limiters, filters. They're just like filters, also on Amazon. You see these things all the time. So we're trying to make connections and de-jargon the jargon. And that's been something that we've worked on, gosh, since 2018. We presented on it before. I'm sure we'll do it again. So what should you do? If you want to foster new collaboration, what do you do? Honestly, I don't know. Why are you asking me? It's not like I'm an authority on it. No situation is ever the same. And your institution surely looks different than mine at the University of Buffalo. However, based on the research Keith and I did and the countless hours we poured into getting these collaborations off the ground and making them work, I suggest taking a step back before anything else and constructing a needs assessment. This might look a little familiar. With your needs assessment, ask the following things. Where are there gaps in your service? Inevitably, there are some. Maybe they're big, maybe they're small, but it's important to establish what they are first. Are there any underserved student populations that would benefit from your help? This will involve a little bit of poking and prodding. Might not be obvious, hence why they are underserved in the first place. Work with your colleagues on this one for sure and get different perspectives. Just because you see it going one way doesn't necessarily mean that it is the truth. Next, if you have determined that there are avenues to go in, collect information. Do it internally first. Does your library have a pre-existing partnership with the department or a student base that you want to work with? The last thing you want to do is step on somebody else's toes. If you're ready to proceed, do your due diligence by researching what others have done in their outreach endeavors. The collaborations I talked about today are just from my personal experience with Keith and with these departments, but they were influenced by the countless others who tried to do them before me. Do not reinvent the wheel. Borrow and be creative. Make it better. Make it your own. You're smart. You've seen things work. You know how it goes. And then your plan of action should look similar. Find the contact information for whom you need. Offer your expertise and service, because remember, they need you too. Ask a lot of questions. Listen intently. You want the partnership to work equally on both sides to leverage each other here. And be realistic about your limitations. Be smart. There's only so much time in a day. Start small. That way there will be more marked successes from the get-go to drive you going forward. Thank you very much. That is all I have. And in case you want to read about what we did, we published about our experiences in this IGI Global book that is just coming out, hopefully by the end of this month. And it also incorporates the experiential learning network that we work with, which is a similar outreach as well, but not the exact same. So if you're looking into more literature, I encourage you to get this. And take a look. You can even just download our chapter through like interlibrary loan with your institution. And without further ado, I will ask you to ask me some questions. I know there were some that came in the chat. I'll put my camera back on.
Yes. So Aaron, I saw you were recording the questions that came through the two from Aisha. Do you want to go ahead and ask those?
Sure do.
Great.
Aisha's first question was, did you mention to tutors when they need, or when that need usually occurs, where that fine line is? And she goes on to say, I'm thinking of timing when it comes to research assignments with faculty. They struggle when they send students to us.
Gotcha. Okay, so the one thing that we really primed the tutors with was to ensure that they got that assignment that the students were supposed to be working on in front of them, so they know the process and they know kind of like the map of where to go. That way, usually they're going to get hamstrung at the same process, which is going to be finding the resources and making meaning out of them. Whereas a tutor can help them find the resources, but the making meaning out of them, like, are they actually important to whatever the research goal is? If it's like a research paper, which it usually is, or annotated bibliography, that's usually the hang up. And specifically, all research topics have a discipline, and these tutors don't work specifically with these disciplines and may not know exactly where to go to find the best information. So that's usually when we start to see them. It's even beyond putting together a thesis statement or a research question, which we usually get when we're in the classroom. Hopefully that answers your question.
Excellent, thank you. Her second question, and it's related to your slides, the specific point. Can you share more about the research plan as well?
Sure. Okay, so each research plan was a little bit differently, worked a little bit different. The first time around, we really relied on the research by going into the pertinent databases with library focus or with education focus, and did a whole lot of searching on outreach initiatives, which gave us both athletics and it gave us both residence education. But we had to figure out the exact keywords, just like anybody would with a research proposal or anything like that. It was really, really difficult to find things. We had to go through things with a fine-tooth comb. We had about, I want to say, 25 different articles that really talked about outreach on both levels, either in one or the other, and about 8 of them were completely useless, or they were just reiterations of something that an author had done 2 years before and just republished on it and repurposed it, and it was just silly. So the research really kind of drove how we wanted to jump into the process, because we wanted to feel like, okay, we have some expertise here, we have some ammo for the fight, I guess you could say, because they're going to come within our potential strategies that we could work into these collaborations. And every research endeavor is different. I'm currently working on another one that's working with how important transfer students are in information literacy initiatives, and that's difficult to find stuff on too. So great, I'm just going to keep finding hard things to research. Awesome, I'm super excited.
That's it. That's all the questions I saw.
Well, there's sort of a question adjacent comment that came through from Danielle. Best ways to get your library on board. I feel like there's always a lot of entropy and naysaying for anything new. So to that, I would ask, how do you get your library kind of excited and interested in pushing forward? Because it does seem, a decent amount of work, a decent amount of moving parts, and a lot of involvement of all the staff.
I will be honest with you. In this tenure process that we are on, we work specifically with mentors, and Keith and I were told by our mentors that this probably wasn't going to be worth it. And we did it anyway. So regardless, we do it, and then we remark on it, and we show people what we do. Being able to publish a book chapter about it, it kind of qualifies it as something that has meaning to librarianship and to other librarians. Like Nancy said, you're creating the content for future researchers. That's what we're doing. We're kind of pioneering here without really being the actual pioneers, but we're using the frameworks that we already are used to do different things with people that need us. And our vice provost is student-centered. So she is more focused on teaching and learning than anything. As long as we do something with teaching and learning, we're going to get some backup. And the more that we do with these departments, the stronger it's going to be for the students, and the more reliable people are going to be on us. And that makes the library more important in and of itself. When people are hitting up a LibGuide thousands of times throughout a semester, you're doing something right, because they're relying on that. And that goes back to the stats with the library, and that's going to look good. And it's marked, like people can see the progress. Then you get those data-driven days off that we're looking for. It's just what it comes down to.
There was another question that came in.
Yeah.
It's actually a series of questions that are all related. I'm curious how the after-hours reference one-on-ones went with the student athletes. Why, after regular business hours, did that require you to come in to work later, or did it require you to work later? And how did you negotiate that with your dean?
Okay, so best practices, we had to do it after hours because that's when students were available. A lot of them have study hours on certain days of the week. Like the football players, the offense meets on Wednesday from 5 to 7, and then the defense meets on Thursday from 5 to 7. We did a little bit of one-on-ones there too, but they have study times set aside so there aren't any practices going on. And yes, we had to negotiate that with our team leader and with our supervisor. So our in time would be flexed, and we would have to flex our time to go a certain way. Usually I'm the night owl. I will be working later into the evening, so it's not really a big deal for me. But sustainability is something that we've also looked into. One of my other colleagues, Beth, who just came onto the team in January, covered a couple of days for Keith when he was out on paternity leave. So we do have a little bit of backup, but it's kind of difficult, but that's the reasoning for it, because that's when they need us the most. So if I have to come in at 11 as opposed to 9 so I can get my 2 hours in. Also, they sign up in advance. So I know if I'm expected to be there, and I know that I'm going to be flexing my day that way, based on a sign up sheet. If nobody's signed up and you get to me at 4:30 and I'm on my way out the door, I'm sorry, I probably can't help you because my day is going to go in a different direction. So you have to kind of stay fast to whatever you're doing.
Just got another couple of questions in. Let's see. Let's do. I'm just going to read this right out. It seems like you do a lot of teaching and outreach for the size of your librarian team. Did you have to do anything to create the time for this? And then the rest of it's commentary.
Mm-hmm. Reading the commentary too.
Oh, there you go.
So we don't have to do reference at a desk. We're not in charge of doing that. However, the majority of us do reference hours like on chat and instant librarian a couple hours a week. If we can't do it, it goes to the chat service in North Carolina. So it's not a big deal. But yeah, we do a lot of teaching. And did I have to do anything to create the time for this? Thankfully, no. The time was already there. When we were only a 0.8 or a 0.84 out of a full time, all we did was teaching and reiteration of the teaching. We were not asked to do any publishing or presenting, but we were doing it anyway because we were already making time for it. And once we jumped to the tenure process and the tenure track process, which we're knee deep in right now, it was still there. Really, we build the time for it, and it does take a lot out of us. Like the energy is right now, the energy is there. Like, I'm like, yeah, but the energy might not be there when it starts to be Buffalo in the winter. Like it gets tough, but it's a good thing. And we do have the time for it. And it's kind of built in already. So thankfully I am in a good place and I like where I am and I like the support that I've been given. If somebody told me to stop doing it, I would be incredibly angry and they would get a absolutely true piece of my mind, 110%. Keith will do the same. Keith is even worse.
And I think this will be our last question. Was there accountability with their coaches?
There were not as far as I know, not with the coaches per se, but with their advisors beyond the tutors. So the two women that we've worked with are Melanie and Christina are their names, and they're both advisors to certain teams. So they organize the tutor process and they organize the one-on-ones with the tutors and that eventually refer to us. So once there's a referral that comes through, the advisors also are made aware of it and they will hold these students accountable. They will email them, they will call them, they will do whatever they have to do in order to get those students to be accountable. And they seem to do a good job at that.
Excellent. I think that's it for questions.
Awesome. I did upload my slides to the Sketch system and my email is there. Please feel free to reach out. We're always looking for collaborations. Even if you want to have a phone call, email me, pick my brain. I'm here to help. I'm here to do whatever I can because quite honestly, some of the strange research stuff that we uncovered while doing the research is weird, and I would like to have some laughs about that with somebody else. Thank you with the slides. Canva, man, Canva's doing it. It's really doing it.